nation, we cry, we are many, we are one. Power, there is power in the union. Power, there is power in our hands. Power, we stand and fight together. There's power in a union of many lands. Power, come and reach across the borders. Power, come and open up your eyes. Power, when we stand and fight together. There's power when we organize. You fight the power of one with the power of many. You fight the power of evil with the power of right. You fight.
It's time for the Rick Smith Show.
I want you to get up now. I want all of you to get up out of your chairs. I want you to get up right now and go to the window, open it, and stick your head out and yell, I'm as mad as hell, and I'm not going to take this anymore!
I don't want to abolish government. I simply want to reduce it to the size where I could drag it into the bathroom and drown in the bathtub.
You bet I cut the taxes at the top.
How dare you? How dare you? Go ahead, make my day.
The Rick Smith Show starts now.
And welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is the Rick Smith Show. Thanks so much for being here today on the big program. Lots to get to, lots to talk about. What a horrible day for those of us who want a free and open internet. Yep, they went, they did it, and look, knew it was going to happen. Not surprising. Not surprised that the Trump-appointed FCC has gone and killed off net neutrality. And we already know what this is about. This is about internet companies being able to have the ability to charge us for absolutely every click, every keystroke, everything possible. It's about profitization. It's all it is. It's about them making more off of us. Simple. And look, the question is will they get away with it? Honestly, truthfully, I don't know. This is one of those days, one of those moments where you just go, how much worse can it get? How much worse can this administration honestly and truthfully get? When you look at the tax plan, you look at the health care plan, you look at this, you look at all of this destruction of what we have come to know as normal. And I've said for a very long time, the reality is they want to push for a privatized America to where every day you're reaching into your pocket. Every time you turn around, they're in your pocket. You're paying for everything. Doesn't matter what you want to walk across the street, it's going to cost you money. You're going to drive your car down the block, going to cost you money. Want to watch a TV program on TV, going to cost you money. Everything you do. And this is really a departure. And just think about the very short period of time that they've been able to do this. I remember as a kid, you could put an antenna on your roof and you could get free TV. Good luck doing that today. And what you see and the best way this was explained to me is if you see what they've done to cable television. You've got all these different packages and all these different, you could get this and that. And the more of the crummy channels that you add, the higher your costs go. This is the future of the internet. This is most certainly the future of the most powerful communications tool that we've ever had, in my view. And what they're doing is they're going, okay, you poor people, no more. We've tried this. We've tried allowing you poor people to communicate, and you just can't do it. Why can't you just buy stuff online like you're supposed to? Why can't you just go and do what you're supposed to do, which is be good little consumers and spend and spend and spend? Why can't you do that? What's wrong with you people? And the sad reality is look, they're getting away with it. And at some point, don't we, you, me, the rest of us, have to stand up and say, you know what? Enough is enough already. It's time for us to fight back. Just kind of a thought on a certain level. And what's really frustrating to me is I didn't see a lot today. I didn't see a lot of anger. I didn't see a lot of pushing back. I mean, it's really just kind of scary at the limited response. And it's frustrating on a number of levels because, as they've taken this resource, and look, the hope is that we will see a number of lawsuits. The hope is that we will see a number of states saying, you know what? No, we're not gonna. We're just not going to allow the kind of degradation to happen. We're just not going to allow it. We're going to stand up and fight back. And look, as I've been saying, this has been coming for a while. And I actually had someone tell me just not too long ago that, well, they'd never heard of it. I'm going, we've been talking about net neutrality, especially on this show, for several years now. The fight to get net neutrality was one thing. Really, honestly and truthfully, a battle that, we should never have let up. The fact that during the Obama years, we were able to win this ability to say, you know what? All content is equal. All content deserves to be seen. And look, if you're breaking laws, that's one thing. But this is dangerous. And it's honestly, this is something you would expect from a fascist regime. I've looked, I can't find anywhere in the world where this kind of a scheme is happening, and there are no examples. What this is purely a blind faith belief in the invisible stuff. The free market, the invisible hand. And the sad reality is every time we look at what the invisible hand does, it's usually giving us the invisible finger. This is going to be no different. And what's interesting to me is today was just packed with all kinds of Trump stuff, all kinds of evidently Trump had a nice long call with Putin today. I guess they spoke where, I guess evidently how this went. Putin was giving a speech. According to the AP, Putin said that of Trump and of the allegations that Russia had interfered in the election, he said, quote, "This is all made up by people who oppose Trump to make his work look illegitimate. Look at the markets, how they went up. That speaks about investors' trust in what he does." And I saw that, and immediately I'm going, who are their writers? Because it sounds like they're reading from the same script. It sounds like, well, they're on the same page. And that page doesn't include you or me or us. And you've got to wonder, with all of this push and all of this destruction and all of this hatred of we the people, because that's what this is. When you see the anti-government stuff of what Trump is evidently had a press photo op today where they had stacks of paper, and I would love to read what was on the paper. I got to think some of them there was nothing on them, but They have big, huge stacks of paper, supposedly going to be all these onerous government regulations, and we're going to get rid of it. And according to the White House press secretary's office, the quote from Trump was, "We will get rid of the redundancy and duplication that wastes your time and your money." And I guess where I found it interesting is redundancy and duplication are kind of the same word. So isn't it redundant to say the same thing twice? Just kind of, and the internet had fun with it as well today from the people who are going to bring us, the free market. So I'm curious your thoughts today. Is this a good thing? I've yet to find anyone who's full-throatedly endorsing net neutrality's demise outside of people who are going to make a lot of money off of it. The Comcast folks, the internet providers, the monopolies, they're going to do really well. Thank you very much. You, me, the consumers, not so much. And guess what? And this is the great part of it. You look at what our Supreme Court has done over the last several years in limiting the ability of you and me and us, we nasty consumers, along with workers, but consumers too, to file class action lawsuits. So even if you wanted to, the Supreme Court's probably going to throw it away because, nope, you got to sue yourself. And as I said, what we learned from the AT&T and Concepcion case is that, if you're going to cheat somebody, cheat them out of a little bit of money over a lot of them. Get a lot of people to give you a little bit of money. This way they can't come together and sue you. And who's going to go after you for $20? This, to me, is kind of what we're going to see. And nothing good here. Nothing good here whatsoever. So I'd love to hear your thoughts. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. This is good thing, bad thing. I'm assuming in my world, bad thing. It's going to be life in the slow lane for programs like ours or anyone not deemed worthy, or two, well, I would say one, people with deep pockets first. The money is always first. So the deep pockets will always do well, and then, well, the rest of us. Quick break, right back after this. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
Controversial, thought-provoking, opinionated. Rick Smith.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1852. That was the day socialist leader Daniel de Leon was born in Curacao to Dutch Jewish parents. As a young man, he traveled Europe. He settled in New York City and earned a law degree from Columbia University in 1878. De Leon joined the Socialist Labor Party in 1890 and became the editor of its newspaper, The People. His book, Socialist Landmarks, consisting of a series of lectures, became wildly popular. These lectures included Reform or Revolution, What Means This Strike, The Burning Question of Trade Unionism, and Socialist Reconstruction of Society. De Leon warned of reforms under capitalism as illusory. He argued for revolutionary socialism and soon assumed leadership of the Socialist Labor Party. As a former member of the Knights of Labor, he was critical of the American labor movement, often referring to the AFL as the American separation of labor for its business unionism and refusal to organize any but the most highly skilled white craft workers. De Leon also took a strong stand against racism in the socialist movement, stating, quote, "Why should a truly socialist organization of whites not take in Negro members, but organize these in separate bodies? On account of outside prejudice, then the body is not truly socialist." De Leon was among the socialist leaders at the founding 1905 Conference of the Industrial Workers of the World. By 1908, he and others looked to effect social change through the Socialist Party and existing trade union movement. This put them at odds with the direct action perspective of the IWW. Many left the IWW at this point, including De Leon and socialist leader Eugene V. Debs. When he died in 1914, more than 30,000 turned out for his funeral. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show.
Waving the flag of freedom for people, not corporations. Rick Smith.
After 5
website, thericksmithshow.com. So huge news yesterday. We talked about it a little bit at the end of the show yesterday. 21,000 AT&T workers across 36 states in the District of Columbia won a massive, just fantastic contract. And look, this has been going on for a while, and we've talked about it for the last several months. The importance of having these kind of organizing victories, these kind of contractual victories in setting, decent wages, decent conditions, and also, well, I would argue, having a say not just in what happens on the job, but where those jobs go. And that's why I've asked Ed Mooney to come talk with us. He's the Vice President of CWA District 2-13. Ed, thanks for taking time for us.
Thanks, Rick. Thanks for having me.
So I guess start off, congratulations. This was a long fight, but it looks like well worth it.
Yeah, and, as most negotiations are nowadays, not many of them get done on time. So we're used to, the time it takes, and we prepare our members, and we go into this with a plan to sustain it for whatever period of time it's going to take till we get a successful outcome of it. So
now, one of the things that
now, and that's why we reached the agreement.
Right. One of these things that caught my attention is evidently the first ever guaranteed call center work. What does that mean?
So, we've had, obviously, we've represented these people for years. We represent them across the country under actual neutrality agreements when we organized with AT&T. But with all of the transfer of work outside the United States to call centers overseas, even if you had a job, if they were closing them around the country, we still were experiencing some people losing jobs as a result of those transfers and closures. So now the language in this agreement says that if any kind of transfer is going to happen, that they know they have other work for you, and they will have to offer you a job somewhere to keep you on the payroll. So that in and of itself should guarantee the level of employment. And also, they doubled the amount of calls that are going to be answered in the centers in this geographic area. So going forward, that will certainly secure it. We're hoping it's going to add numerous jobs. Probably won't double the number of members we have there, 21,000 to 42,000, but it should increase it significantly.
And look, I'm sure for consumers, this is a fantastic thing because, look, I know I've made calls to call centers, and half the time you can't understand the folks on the other end. So to me, this is a win for consumers as well, not just for your members.
Oh, yeah. And it'll be, and that's what we fight for all the time, is to make sure that the work is done here. If this is where you're deriving your customer base from, then you, as a corporation, you ought to return that investment to your communities. This actually coupled with, if the tax bill goes through, which will be detrimental to many middle-class families, but corporations such as AT&T are banking on that and are leading the government to believe that when they get that additional tax break of being able to import the revenue that they made overseas at a lower tax rate, that also will generate them hiring more in the United States. That remains to be seen, and in fact, we tried to get them to commit to those numbers of hiring if the bill passes, and they wouldn't do that.
I look at the letter that your national president sent out, saying,
right.
Companies, you need to be you sign on to this and make sure that our people get a $4,000 raise. This looks like this agreement looks like a start towards down that.
You may be surprised to find out, Rick, we haven't gotten one of them back signed yet.
No, I'm not surprised at all. But here's the thing. I mean, this is the kind of stuff that has to happen. These kind of victories, the messaging that comes out of this, so that people go, you know what? We have the ability to organize, to come together, and to bargain for better wages, hours, conditions, and, oh, by the way, job security and policy of where the companies go.
Yeah, and we're hoping, each one of these battles that we get into and we conclude successfully, and with programs such as yours that shares this information with everyday working people across the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania and across the country, actually, that we're hoping workers begin to see that if I am in a place now, if I'm working in a call center in the United States or any unrepresented place of employment throughout the United States, I have an opportunity to have a say in my future by accessing collective bargaining. This is how the middle class got ahead from the early 1950s until, within the past decade and a half. And then we've become convinced that we don't need unions and we don't need collective bargaining. And then we wonder why we've had stagnant wages throughout the entire economy for 40 years.
Yeah.
There's the answer.
No,
Get to the bargaining table, negotiate your wages, your benefits, your working conditions every couple of years, such as we continue to do in the labor movement here. And that's how you improve your standard of living. And also, that's how you get a share of what you're generating for that corporation.
and this is a very profitable company. And the raise that I saw, not too shabby, 10.1% over the next 4 years. That's better than most people are getting.
Right. And also, two of them are coupled right back to back. One, because we've been negotiating for over a year. So upon ratification, they'll get a 2.25% wage increase retroactive back to last February. And then in February, they'll get a 3% raise. So that's 5.25% without the compounding, inside of a month. And, haven't seen 5% wage increases like that in several years. So, it's good for the members. There's other provisions in the contract in the sales environment that moves money from a commissions plan, which is referred to as at risk. So there's a pool of money you can make, but it has to be made by doing the sales. More of that money, a big chunk of that money, moves into guarantees that will also help in the sales environment, which we are hoping in turn provides more stability to those employees, because there has been a great turnover in the retail environment, whether it's a storefront or online sales functions. And we believe much of it is because of the changing goals in the sales programs that these companies have been running. So obviously our objective is to move more of that money in to the guaranteed side while still incenting the employees to do the sales to service the customers that they need. But now it's only sales of products the customer actually needs, not incenting them to sell things that customers don't need.
Right. No, and that's good. Now, I understand there was a good part of this was also the retail workers, the people that you deal with in the stores. Or am I right on this?
Yeah, correct. That's the employees I'm referring to. The storefront workers gotten a tremendous amount of security there, because if they do attempt to close the store, and you hope that the employer will be honest with you and they're giving you the real reason of why they're closing the store. If it's a location, if it's not enough traffic and they're moving to a more populated place, it's going to improve business. That kind of stuff you can deal with and understand that the workers may have to move a little bit within the same geography.
Right.
But what we've experienced recently was the company closing their company-owned stores and moving more to contracted stores known as authorized retailers. And there have been numerous concerns and complaints with the authorized retailers. They're not employees of AT&T, and they're just in it for the quick buck and to move on. So we're hoping through this agreement that will provide more stability to those retail workers in the storefronts, and also a better product to the end user, which is the customer.
Yeah. Let me ask you the other side of this. I mean, this is a great agreement. I'm looking at these numbers going, wow, if I'm a Verizon storefront worker, if I'm one of the Verizon wireless workers, I'm looking at this and going, hey, how do I get that?
Well, the way they get it is by accessing collective bargaining. And actually, this employee group at AT&T Mobility and CWA members across the country have been reaching out to Verizon wireless workers, because the only way that they're going to obtain any of this is if they access collective bargaining. So there has been a network established. Those groups of employees are working together, and we're hoping that this generates more opportunities, because it gives those people a greater opportunity for their employment, and also to give themselves the security and stability of a union contract.
Yeah, good stuff all the way around, and the hope is that reverberates throughout the industry, because I remember a time, and I'm hoping it comes back very soon, that I was in trucking for a number of years, and when the master freight agreement saw raises, the entire industry gave their employees raises, and it was the union carriers and it was the union workers who set the industry standard, and I'm hoping we're heading back in those days.
Well, you and I both. It's I'm a 29.5-year union member, and I can tell you that my life has been made tremendously better as a result of the union contract, and I've been a part of since June of 1988, when I was hired at the phone company in Philadelphia.
I testify to the same thing, me as well. So great job on this. I want to ask you the other side. Today is one of these weird days where you've got this great this great outcome in your contract, but on the federal level, we see that the FCC has killed off net neutrality. Do you guys got any thoughts on where this goes?
Well, the only place for that to go is that then they're going to start, choking off the systems for their own benefit. If companies are now able to put a profit margin on what you're seeing over that network, obviously everyone's costs are going to go up. Your content costs will go up. And the way they will do that is by the company controlling what you get access to. So, we've been hoping, we wanted a free and open internet. We see the regulatory issues that are going backwards with this administration. You've seen not only, the environment, it's regulation. When they talk about it, the pollution stuff that they are deregulating, they are now going to remove these regulations and allow the company to control what you're watching, what you're viewing. And ultimately that leads to them trying to figure out how they make more money off of what you want. And if they restrict access to it, they then put a price on it for you to get it back. So we believe it has negative consequences, which is why we've opposed it. And, we're hoping that it can be corrected.
Does this affect your members in any way, or is this just a societal thing in your view?
Well, I mean, for us, this is about a public service, and this is about things now. This is what happens. Corporations get you so in tune to something, and then they try to figure out a way. Okay, well now it's saturated, and maybe our profits are stagnating. So how do we gain more profits? Well, we come up with these scams. We pretend it's coming through the government, right? Where really it's the corporations who are pushing this, because they know if it's free and open to you, then they have a profit margin that for most employers would be fantastic. But with these kinds of behemoth companies like Verizon, AT&T, and the other telecommunications giants that are involved in this, they need to keep feeding that beast. So how do we continue to say to our shareholders, we're getting more revenue, we're increasing this, we're increasing that? There's only one way to do it, and they have to continuously come up with ways to do that. And, I mean, do you ever think in your wildest dreams that the percentage of your total household budget that goes towards telecommunications and television would be as high as it is today?
No, I was just saying in the first part of it, when I was a kid, we had free television. Somehow they've convinced us that we need 300 channels of nothing to watch, and we're going to pay $100 a month for it.
Correct.
And,
Right.
the telephone, you used to pick up the telephone. That was a couple of bucks a month. I mean, now I think, my cell phone bill is my second highest bill.
Yep.
It
can't get any better. It's not going to get any cheaper with these kinds of provisions and with them repealing the net neutrality.
Yeah, I'm hoping that with 18 or 19 states are talking about filing a lawsuit. Maybe there's a way to stop it. I don't know. But again, it's going to come back to we coming together and fighting on this. Last question I've got for you, in looking at the contract, what message are you hoping? Because I want to hammer on that. What message are you hoping people are going to take from this?
Well, I hope people take from it that if you join together in your workplace, then you form a union and you fight together collectively with your coworkers, and you get access to collective bargaining, you can improve your lot in life. That's the only way. If we're going to stand by, listen, we'll do an informal survey here. We'll see how many of these corporations, out of the goodness of their heart, actually pass along this money to their employees if this tax cut is passed, which I hope it isn't. And if that happens, then maybe there's no need for collective bargaining. But history has told us in this country that the only way you're going to get ahead and the only way you're going to get a fair share of the revenue that you generate for your employer is if you join together with your coworkers, you get access to collective bargaining, and you negotiate the wages, benefits, and working conditions periodically with your employer so that you gain a fair share of the profits that you're generating as an employee.
Absolutely. Because if there were benevolent employers, if they were all wonderful like we're led to believe, you wouldn't have had to fight 10 months to get a reasonable contract.
I tell all people, if you don't like unions, want to see unions go away, just treat your workers well, and you would never see one. Which is why we exist today, right?
Excellent
Either
point.
treat them well, we wouldn't exist, or you try to hijack the laws like they do in this country, and you try to rig them so that they can't exist, so that you can threaten them and intimidate your workers so that they can't join a union. But I think you're seeing now employees are starting. Also, when the job market gets better, employees become more emboldened and are willing to take more risks to join a union because they know even if they lost the job that they're in, there are other jobs out there, right? And as you're well aware and your listeners are well aware, we have the previous administration to thank for that, not the fantasies this administration has been telling so far, that all of this wonderful economy we're living in now has been created since he was elected.
And the truth of the matter is we've had less job creation this year than we had last, which again,
Right.
to highlight that point. But let me ask you, since you brought that up, because that kind of makes me is this next year, a lot of people are saying is going to be the Armageddon year for labor with the Janus decision coming up. Are you hopeful in the coming year?
I'm an eternal optimist. So what I always look at is, when the labor movement has faced challenges every single year of its existence. And, if we're not up to the challenge, then we're not going to be here, and we probably shouldn't be. If the general public would understand, and people who are members of labor unions, and even if you're not a public worker, you're in the private sector, and realize the benefits that public sector workers bring to society, and that what public sector unions bring to society, then we can defeat all this stuff. You just seen in Pennsylvania the other day, where they tried to pass a bill, to stop payroll deduction, union deductions for political action committees, or union deduction of union dues and other things. All of these things are designed to choke off the funding of unions so they can't do their job effectively, right? If you have a local school board or a local home and school association, and they have no money to run the home and school association, but the school association down the road each kicks in $5 per family per month, which town you think is going to have a better home and school association? The one with no money or the one with money?
Yep.
Right? They're going to be able to function. And this is what they design these bills to do. They try to convince the public that it's unnecessary. They convince the public that somehow a public worker having a union is a harm to them, right? And they want to choke off the funding so the union cannot be effective in doing the job they need to do on behalf of their members.
Yeah, and the other part of it that I love to bring up with my free market friends is it's something that the union negotiated for. It's something that's on the table when you sit down and negotiate. Why do you want the government to come in and tell you what you can and cannot negotiate over?
And not only that, isn't the other side the group that says they don't want anybody to have anything for free? But yet they'll allow you to be the member of the union and reap all the benefits without contributing to it. Seems kind of like it's in conflict, right?
Yeah, well, and not just kind of. But it's as you've said, it's designed to starve the resources and still have a labor movement around to kick when they need to, but not one that's going to be effective enough to really fight back. Because look, I've said beside government, labor unions are the only thing that balance out the greed of the handfuls and of these big corporations, which is why we're seeing this mass inequality in this country.
Yep. And, when you go back to where labor was at its highest point from the early 50s to 1970, we as labor unions were able to pull every single worker in the economy up with us. When you talk about wage stagnation over the last 40 years, union members' wages haven't stagnated very much because we continue going back to the bargaining table. That difference between union and non-union wages, that's where the differences come from. And also, it's not just the hourly workers. First-level management and middle management, they have been harmed as much, if not more, than any union worker in this country because they've taken all the benefits away from those individuals that they used to give them because the union contract provided it to the union members.
Yep.
So those people who think that they never benefited from workers in their area being in a union are sadly mistaken.
Yeah, I remember when we were negotiating, back when I was a Teamster in the Master Freight Agreement, it was those frontline supervisors going, "Hey, get as much as you can because they usually give us what you got. So go for the gold." And it's exactly what you're saying.
And then the ones at the top figured that out as well. And what they also figured out was these ones who are management who have no access to collective bargaining and they have no protections of the union, they also had no way to fight back. So they said, why are we giving this to them when we don't have to? We can take it from them, line our pockets with the half we take from them, and then use those people against the union members, because now those managers no longer pull for their union workers because we went from a society in the 50s, 60s, and early 70s that said, hey, that's great. You have that? That's wonderful. How do I get it? To a society now that says, You have that? Why should you have that? I don't.
Yeah, it's crazy, isn't it?
It's the same. It's the same line that they're using with people's, indifference towards public sector unions. Well, if I'm at an employer and I don't have a pension, if you're a public worker and I'm paying my taxes that provide your salary, why should you have a pension when I don't? Right? Instead of having people aspire for those things, they want to pit one group against the other. Right? Jay Gould, the old industrialist, he would be jumping for joy right now, living out his dream of hiring one half of the working class to kill the other half.
Yep. No,
right?
I mean, that's...
I am thrilled. I am thrilled every time I hear someone else achieve something for themselves and their coworkers at their employer, and I applaud them. I never look at it and say, gee, that's going to raise my cost from if I use that product. Because if they're generating the profits and the revenues and they're providing the product and the service to you, then they should be succeeding. And if they're succeeding and more people are getting access to collective bargaining, then we're all succeeding and we're moving forward, not just the upper 1% or now it's 1/10 of 1%.
Like they said, we all do better when we all do better. Ed, I want to thank you. Congratulations on the victory. Good on you. Good on your members, and I appreciate the time. Thanks so much.
Great, Rick. I want to thank you for always giving us the time to express our issues on your show. And I hope this was okay. I'm actually driving to Maryland, so I hope this wasn't too noisy for you. So I appreciate your time, and we'll get together early in the next year to make sure we continue to help you out.
Good stuff. I appreciate it, Ed. Thanks so much. Ed Mooney, Vice President of CWA District 2-13. Like I said, huge win. We'll get a link at thericksmithshow.com of how you can check out the article on the big win. Good stuff. Let's take a quick break. Right back after this. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
And the bills are creeping through the door. It's desperate times, so desperate measures we explore. Marching on the Capitol to lobby leaders for involvement. 3,000 people screaming out, "Where's our government?" Lawsuits and arraignments, members under company surveillance. Public divided, either they love us or they hate us. Profit billions off our backs, and it's still not enough. They should have took into account that we never give up. We'll be here one day longer. One day longer. The people's voice is stronger. The people's voice is stronger. We work hard for our money, we work hard for respect. Keep fighting for these rights for generations, it's next. One day longer. One day longer. The people's voice
Your
is
working class
stronger.
radio experience, where hard work, common sense, and rational thought are a reality. The Rick Smith Show.
We found thousands of farm workers out in the fields of Ventura County without the protective masks that they need.
Officials warn of toxic smoke from Southern California wildfires.
The Arctic as a whole is warming at least twice as fast as the rest of the planet.
New bad news for the melting Arctic. At Global Summit, the world fights climate change without the U.S. Plus,
please come to France.
French president makes good on promise to fund U.S. climate scientists.
All of those stories and more straight ahead from Brad Block.
We found thousands.
And that's all it is. And this is your Green News Report. Okay, Desi Doyen, it is damn near Christmas, and we are still fighting wildfires out here in Southern California.
Winter wildfires, which is really weird. But yes, the wildfires still rage in Southern California, and now state officials are warning of hazardous air quality in some areas, telling residents to stay inside to avoid exposure to toxic smoke and carcinogenic ash from incinerated homes. But labor activists warn that thousands of farm workers are still working outside in the dangerous smoke and have not received protective equipment from their employers. That's according to Lucas Zucker of the Central Coast Alliance United for a Sustainable Economy in an interview with Democracy Now!
We've found thousands of farm workers out in the fields of Ventura County without the protective masks that they need. You know, workers are really faced with this horrific choice of either giving up the income they desperately need in a time like this or be out in conditions that are endangering their health and safety.
And for people who don't know the area out here in Southern California, there are farms, orchards, a vast agricultural area. They call this part of Southern California running the salad bowl because it produces so much of the food for the rest of the country. And I can only imagine what it's like out there working in those fields right next to these fires, which are hundreds of miles wide.
Disturbing news for the Arctic. The National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration reports that this year clocked in as the second warmest year on record for the Arctic, with the smallest extent of sea ice ever on record. NOAA Arctic Director Jeremy Mathis warned that the rate and magnitude of sea ice loss since 2000 is unprecedented in at least 1,500 years. Studies have increasingly linked the melting Arctic to changing weather patterns and extreme weather events in the Northern Hemisphere. At the One Planet Summit in Paris this week,
we're in the process of losing the battle.
French President Emmanuel Macron called on European leaders and corporations to pick up the pace of action in cutting emissions that cause dangerous global warming. Macron also made good on an earlier promise, announcing multi-million-dollar grants to 13 U.S. climate scientists to conduct their research in France, after U.S. President Donald Trump, who was not invited to the conference, vowed he would withdraw the U.S. from the historic UN Paris Climate Agreement in 2020.
So we're not funding these scientists anymore. France has to step in and fund U.S. climate science.
That's right.
Unbelievable.
But American political and business leaders were also there in Paris to organize and to help developing countries prepare for climate impacts. Former California Governor Arnold Schwarzenegger offered some blunt reassurance.
It doesn't matter that Donald Trump backed out of the Paris Agreement, because the private sector didn't drop out, the public sector didn't drop out, universities didn't drop out, scientists didn't drop out, engineers didn't drop out, no one dropped out. Donald Trump pulled Donald Trump out of the Paris Agreement.
Among several major announcements at the summit, the World Bank and global insurer AXA said they will end all financing for oil and gas exploration starting in 2019. Major investors launched a campaign to pressure the world's top 100 greenhouse gas emitting corporations to reduce their emissions. And China's environment minister announced China is on the cusp of launching its nationwide carbon emissions trading market, which would be the largest in the world. Finally, the U.S. private sector is stepping up its investment in clean energy technology at home. Tesla Motors' new all-electric semi-truck was unveiled just last month, but it's already pulling in hundreds of pre-orders from major corporations. The latest from beverage giant Pepsi, which this week ordered 100 Tesla all-electric semis, citing its lower overall cost compared to conventional internal combustion semis.
Give it up, Desi Doyen. Elon Musk is not going to give you a free Model 3.
Oh, come on.
For much more on all of those stories and the ones we couldn't get to today, please check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com. Don't forget, you can download our reports anytime via Stitcher, TuneIn, or iTunes. Find us and follow us worldwide on the Facebooks and the Twitters, even in France, at Green News Report. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
And this has been your Green News Report.
The most important issues of the day. This is the Rick Smith Show.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Check out our website, thericksmithshow.com. So, Omarosa was on Good Morning America. Had an interesting quote. Points out that she said, as the only African-American woman in the White House, I have seen things that have made me uncomfortable. They have upset me. They have affected me deeply and emotionally, and they have affected my community and my people. Now she cares about the community and the people. I want to know what was so deeply affecting her. What did she see? While she was trying to break into the residence? Don't know. Anyway, let's find out what's going on around the world. Check out our website, TheRickSmithShow.com. So, Omarosa was on Good Morning America.
No voices
had an interesting quote. Who actually have to work under whatever it is that they negotiate. She said, as the only African American woman in the White House, of the North American Free Trade Agreement, is following made me uncomfortable. They have upset me, and here to help shed some light deeply on what we know, what we don't know, as the sixth community round of talks wraps up this week. Is Celeste Rick. She's AFL-CIO's Trade and Globalization Policy Specialist. Deeply, thanks for taking time for us. What did she see while she was trying to break into the residence? Don't know. Anyway, let's find out what's going on around the world. Bob Day, Talk Media News. Bob, thanks for taking time for us.
She got connected, or what the scoop was? I never knew.
Yeah, wasn't she on The Apprentice or something? Wasn't she part of the cast, and that's how they became somewhat knowing each other? And it just, reality people seem to go together. I don't know. I have no idea why she was even there.
I don't know why she didn't just spill out today why exactly she left. I don't know. Maybe she's waiting to get.
She's waiting for the money, man. Little tease. This is what the reality people do much better than we do. We just put the case on the table. It is what it is. No, they're always teasing, trying to get that money.
That's right. You know, and they brand. You know, Trump is a brander of what he wants to people, what he wants to put out there. By the way, speaking of branding, I watched the communications position for the U.S. House, Republicans. And she was on TV and she kept saying the tax bill, the tax bill. Well, if you call me Rick and say I have a tax bill for you, I'm going to be afraid. It's supposed to be the tax relief, and I mention this because they're not getting out ahead of the curve.
No, I think I really think they thought this was going to be since they have the majority, it was going to be easy to move through, and they didn't have to think all that stuff out, and they don't have people as smart as you doing this stuff, Bob.
Well, I don't know how smart it was, but we got our heads beaten politically when people would come into the Republican conference and say, look, you've got to see how you say things and what you do and how you present. And if you want to get people to at least listen to you, then talk to them. And I just noticed that, they haven't done it. Also, did you see the rumor today about Paul Ryan?
No, what was that?
The speaker? Okay, the rumor is after midterm elections 2018, he's out of there. He's done. He's not going to be the speaker. And I was just thinking to myself, in the midst of, wanting to keep seats, right?
Yeah.
Why would you even dare, if he did say this, it had to leak out from a Republican. Why would you even say that?
Yeah, that's kind of dumb.
This place is dysfunctional.
Oh, no, it's completely dysfunctional. And thank goodness that it is. But did he say it or did someone else say it? Is he want out? I mean, is that the gist?
Well, I didn't pick up the whole thing, but they're saying that he had stated this. He had alluded to it or had stated it in the meeting. I'm just saying that on top of everything, why would you even say that to anybody if he is going to leave? You hold those cards close to your vest if you want to help the party, obviously.
Yeah, or the other part of this, he's expecting to lose, and Iron Stash is going to take him out, and Randy Bryce there in Wisconsin, and maybe the Iron Stash will come in and take his space.
Is that what they're calling him?
Well, it's what he calls himself. That's his Twitter handle. And I've had him on the show. He's a good guy, iron worker. Has an incredible story. The kind of person that you want to get behind.
Well, when I got elected, everybody kind of laughed at a guy named George Nethercutt, and you remember who he took out? He took out Speaker Foley.
Yeah.
You never know what's going to happen in these years coming up. And that's the, kind of segueing into, you don't know what's going to happen on the tax relief or the tax bill, because now John McCain's having medical treatments. Thad Cochran is having health problems. Marco Rubio is saying, well, I might be no now. I think he's fishing for something. Yeah, Susan Collins, I think they'll get her. They'll promise her something and she'll go along with it. But right now, I don't know if you saw where the Vice President has canceled his trip to Egypt for now and Israel because they need him, right? They're counting the votes. It's a 50-50 tie, I guess, at this point in time.
So is it canceled? I had heard originally that they had just pushed it back and he was going to leave on Wednesday. So they've canceled it entirely now?
Well, I probably used the wrong word, but it's pushed back, but it's canceled for now.
Okay.
It's indefinite in the sense that if they don't have this vote by Wednesday, he won't go.
No, they need this. They need a victory this year.
Yes, and you and I have talked about this. They haven't had a win. That's why they're going to have something. Something will come out of this bill. Now, if you've got a conference committee that was short term, which, by the way, it was breakfast between Mitch McConnell and Speaker Ryan as the conference committee. And look, the Democratic side's done these things.
Sure.
But on complicated bills like this, I promise you two things. One, there's going to be a lot of smelly things in there that members are going to pick up the newspaper and say, is that in that bill? I voted for that. Little riders or special interests. And number two on it is that they're going to have to come back and repair parts of the bill. If the Democratic side takes control next election and there's some type of problem, they may not correct it. And again, if it's a problem dealing with the citizens, then they may. But you can't pass a bill like this that there's not going to be some type of errors in it with a quick conference committee.
I mean, it's terrible. There have been no hearings. This is I was just having a conversation with a Tea Party guy yesterday, and he was I was reminding him of the complaints about the Affordable Care Act and how he claimed they rammed that down our throats. I go, look at this tax bill. Why aren't you outraged about this tax bill, which is literally being rammed down our throats and no good for us?
Well, I think, Rick, that people become numb, whichever party's in control, and if they do things like this, I think people become maybe not numb, but they expect that this is going to happen. They expect that there's not going to be, it's going to be like some kind of war or battle out there. Now, I can see Mitch McConnell, I can see his point of view that he can't afford for this to go another day. It really should be voted on tomorrow. I mean, he can't afford for people to go home. He can't afford for somebody else to get sick. He can't afford for something to happen to somebody.
Yeah, and he can't afford to have his members go home and get beat up and then come back with maybe a change of heart.
Well, plus, Rick, let's face something. People are going to start to torture him in his own party, in the Senate. They're going to want things. Marco Rubio now is starting to say, well, I don't know if I'm going to vote for it. You have to give them something.
And do you remember, like I do, that these were the people who were against, the pork, and they were always complaining about the backroom deals, and it's just kind of ironic that you just hear just a very short time later, they are doing all of the ugliness and all of the things that they seem to have been completely against just a couple short years ago.
Well, eventually, too, they have to yield on things. They are against pork, but then there'll be something somebody wants. You have to put it in, and that's pork. Of course, I never did buy that argument because, look, if the members don't express their will, either side of the aisle, then the executive makes all the decisions of who gets money.
Right.
What areas get money, what states get money. I never did understand that argument of I'll turn it all over to the president. Let he or she decide. I never did get that one.
No, I was saying all during that period, and I'll still say it. I'm a big fan of pork. That's how things get done. That's how we get bridges, and that's how we get museums and libraries, and that's how things get done. And you want your representative advocating. You want them bringing stuff home because it's good for the community, I think. You could disagree, but I just think it's just how things have been done.
Well, we always supported the will of the people who communicate, and they communicate with their members, and their members go after things versus the executive or some bureaucrat that's unelected in D.C. deciding what Pennsylvania, Ohio, or some other state's going to have.
Yeah. It's just amazing. The other big story today, net neutrality died what I think is a quiet death. Didn't hear an awful lot about it today on the mainstream news.
No, there was two issues that have shocked me. One was the net neutrality, and the other is the Iran issue. Now, they came out today, Nikki Haley, and I have a reason I think she did this, but she came out today with a story on Iran. But the net neutrality, it really didn't get the coverage I think it did, but it's the internet. And, all these people in the United States that are on the internet, and once this gets around, members of Congress are going to get absolutely bombarded. There's a process yet in this rule, but if people realize that they can get hoodwinked by the big providers who all of a sudden are going to charge them, or somebody else takes, because they're paying, takes the broadband width. Once they find that out, they may get hopping and get on the internet and bombard these offices with emails and things.
I sure hope so, because look, at the end of this, part of what I do is dependent on a free and open internet. And look, I've got friends who live in different parts of the world, and we pay way more than everybody else and get much slower speeds. I can't imagine how much more we're going to end up having to pay and on what kind of crummy service we're going to end up getting, unless you're willing to pay for the top tier stuff.
Right. And so I think once people wake up to it, they'll get on it.
But will it be too late? This is the other part of this, Bob. Will it then be too late? I mean, it's like a lot of this stuff. Everyone keeps telling me, well, in next year we'll undo it. I'm going, no, you're not going to undo all of it. Once they open the door, once they push through, some of this stuff stays regardless of what you do down the road.
Well, you're correct, because the Fed, unlike most states have an ability with the legislature to go after a rule. We have it in Ohio. It's called JLEC, JLIC, and we have the ability to do it. The Fed doesn't have that type of system, so they'll have a hearing and they'll beat their chest, and they can't really do much about it because they're out of time anyway on everything. So the agencies have an upper hand. So it's better this didn't happen. But when people say, well, they'll take care of it next year, that may not happen. Plus, and I know I battled agencies before. I battled HUD on a rule I did, and HUD turned around to me, Rick, and said, well, you didn't mean that in your legislation. I said, yes, I wrote it. Yes, I did mean it. And I said,
I'll tell you what you mean, Bob.
And it took me 2 years to get a provision in to help people that own trailers. 2 years, because HUD told me that's not what I meant. So this rule, certainly this is not a big win for people today, and they can't automatically think, in fact, that this is going to change. They need to be on the internet now, getting a hold of their members of Congress and just absolutely screaming, as loud as they can about this.
Yeah, we've been talking about this for a couple of years now. This is not a new issue. People should, in my view, everyone should already know about it. It just is what it is. Let's talk about the Iran thing for a minute. Evidently, we've gone past an expiration date. Tell me about it.
Well, yes. Now, Nikki Haley came out today and was complaining about Iran, and they violated, some missiles, and we got to do something about it. But that the timing intrigues me of what she's doing, because remember, Barack Obama, of course, did the Iran deal. We know that. And Donald Trump said the worst deal in the history of the world. And Senator Cotton of Arkansas wrote a letter when Barack Obama was trying to do the Iran deal to the Iranians, and got a lot of flack on it. And then after the election, Senator Cotton and a lot of other senators on the Republican side said, well, horrible deal, the worst deal in the world. So President Trump basically starts the process to decertify our involvement on our approval of the deal. He said Iran is not doing what it's supposed to do. Well, then the clock started ticking, and the Congress had 60 days. The sanctions were removed under President Obama. If the Congress under Donald Trump had 60 days, which would have been December the 12th, Rick, 60 days to say, okay, we're going to put those sanctions right back on. Crickets, silence. They did nothing. After all the yelling and the screaming and Senator Cotton going crazy about Iran, they did nothing. They let the deadline come and go, and they said, here, President Trump, we're going to punt the football back to you. I seriously couldn't believe it. I'm still trying to decide why they did it. And I think it's because, in part, some people probably said, look, we're not going to mess with this because there's a process, and if we mess with it, Iran starts to build nuclear facilities.
Yeah, which goes back to maybe it wasn't such a bad deal from the beginning. Wasn't the greatest, but it wasn't bad.
Right. So I just found it amazing that there was basically zero coverage on this.
Wow.
Nothing.
Well, we've got Amoroso to talk about.
Well, that's true.
We've got all this other stuff. We've got lots of distractions. Bob, I appreciate the time, man. Great talking with you.
You too.
Good
Thank
stuff.
you.
Bob Ney, Talk Media News. Quick break. Right back after this.
Radio of for and by we the working people. The Rick Smith Show. Waving the flag of freedom for people, not corporations. Rick Smith.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Check out our website, ricksmithshow.com. Our tweet of the day, and again, you look at some of the things people are saying on Twitter over this net neutrality deal, which is just horrible. Our tweet of the day comes from our next guest, who he tweeted out, "Oh look, another piece of badly thought out corporate-friendly policy that will harm America in the long term." And you could go through a whole bunch of policies that this administration has pursued, and that line of thought right there is what you could probably assign to all of them. And that's why I've asked Luke Barnes to come talk with us. He's a reporter over at Think Progress. Luke, thanks for taking time for us.
Thank you for having me on. Appreciate it.
So today, net neutrality died what I would argue is a fairly silent death. Not a lot of fanfare in the media, not a lot of discussion, especially since we have a major corporate-controlled media structure in this country.
Yeah, it was quite depressing to see, actually. I went down to the FCC headquarters, and while there were some people outside protesting, inside, Chairman Pai was seemed very smug and happy with how things were proceeding. And the repeal vote was done on party lines as well, 3-2, 3 Republicans, 2 Democrats. And while the Democrats there very vociferously dissented against the repeal, it passed. And it's really kind of going to, if the legislation is enacted as Mr. Pai wants it to, it's really going to change the face of the internet as we know it.
And how do you see that happening? What's their argument for doing this? I mean, I know on the right they have this almost blind faith religious belief in invisible things. The invisible hand, the market will decide everything. Is that really the argument here, that the free market will decide and everything else will just work itself out?
Yeah, the basic argument right now is that the Obama era Pai loves this phrase, heavy-handed government regulations, and the heavy-handed government regulations he's talking about are the Obama era regulations, which state that you can't that certain websites you can't get faster access to them than other websites. Which means that, Netflix, for instance, can't pay extra to get faster service than some, small the website for some small mom and pop shop in the middle of nowhere.
Well, like our show right here. So let me ask you this real quick before you go on. How is not taking a position on what content gets seen heavy-handed regulations? I must be missing something.
Well, it's not at all. That's the thing. Pai's trying to paint the picture that somehow the Obama era regulations are like strangling innovation, and they're not. What they're allowing is for the small guy to create a website, and then that website can be readily accessed by hundreds of thousands, millions of people. I mean, people forget all the time, or Pai seems to have conveniently forgotten that all the great innovation that we've seen on the web over the last 10, 15 years has come from the small guys. Facebook was founded in a dorm room. Google back in 97 was founded by 2 PhD students. Skype was founded by a very small group of Estonian software programmers. They're the small people making the products which are going to change the world in a couple of years. And what Pai is basically doing now is creating an internet structure in which that innovation is not readily accessible to the average people, and corporations have control. And they can decide what products or what websites we should visit. And if those websites interfere with their version of the product, then they can have a stranglehold on them.
And again, it comes back down to who has the most money wins in this free market ideological positioning that they've come up with. One of the things that I had come across, and someone said, well, they're still going to make sure that the big companies don't crush everyone. They're going to have the Federal Trade Commission. They're going to provide some oversight. They're going to do something, though.
Yeah, that's completely that's ridiculous, frankly. Because what the FTC says it will do. I mean, there was this big, hubbub about, oh, yeah, as you mentioned, we're going to get the FTC in here, where they're going to police this agreement to make sure that internet service providers do what they say. And what the FTC has actually promised to do is basically make sure that the ISPs don't lie. Okay, that the ISPs don't promise that they're going to deliver one thing and then go back on that. But they have no power to enforce whether, if an ISP like Comcast says, we're going to deliver, such and such a speed for the economy class of customers, such and such a speed for the premium class of customers, and if you want to access Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, whatever, you have to pay $10 extra a month. And they state that clearly, then the FTC doesn't have any power to rein them in. The FTC basically has to say, okay, that's fine. You're not lying about it. You're delivering an awful service, but you're not lying about it, so you're fine. So this is all just smoke and mirrors on Pi's part.
Yeah. And the other part of it, Luke, is the fact that, they're telling us heavy-handed government. We need to deregulate, but then they're falling back on, but we'll have this regulation, which is just kind of twisted to me.
No, it's absolutely twisted. I mean, Pi seems to be, it's following a very, very familiar Republican pattern. And this is something I wrote about 2 days ago, I think. But you have this legislation, which everyone says is a bad idea, be it healthcare, be it taxes, be it internet regulation with what we're seeing now. You have this regulation which you're trying to repeal, and everyone says it's a bad idea. And they continue to do it. They continue to ram through policy changes and legislation changes, despite all the independent experts and all the businesses saying, listen, guys, this is a really, really awful idea. You're actually going to harm America in this way. And they continue to do it because they're basically bequeathed to their corporate overlords, if you really want to know what I think. And then they're going to kick the can of the consequences down the road for someone else to deal with.
No, and that's not just this net neutrality; it's everything. And
Exactly.
I've had those exact conversations. People going, why do the Republicans continue to push these bad policies when in a very divided country, and the U.S. is split almost right in half. When you can get 60 or 70 or 80% of the people to say your health care plan is bad, your tax plan is bad, this net neutrality thing is bad. I mean, that's a unifying force, and you would think, at least one would think, that it would equate to electoral slaughtering come November's. The sad reality is it just doesn't as often as it should.
I mean, that's one thing. I mean, I suppose if you wanted to look at a slight silver lining, I really do say slight here, silver lining to this repeal today is that, this is an issue which has energized a lot of people. Like a few months ago, people really didn't know what net neutrality was. It's a complicated online term. I don't know how to tackle it, et cetera, et cetera. But people have become aware of actually what the Republican-dominated FCC is doing now is really, really messed up. And that's energized and galvanized a lot of people and a lot of young people, as has the Republicans' failed attempt at healthcare reform, their tax reform, which looks like it's sadly going to go through. So that's galvanizing people and hopefully driving them to the polls come 2018 and to vote for Democrats and to vote these Republicans out of office. So that's perhaps something good that will come of this, although that's, down the line, and we can't take that for granted at all.
Yeah.
So, fingers crossed, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I just want sane people. I don't even care what party they're on. I just want people who are sane and rational. Let me ask you this. When you look at this, what they're doing here, anywhere else in the world going this route where you could go, there's an example here and this is how it's working, or they could use as this is being done in this country or this place and it's working fabulously. Is there anywhere that is happening?
No, I mean, the thing is, it's quite ironic, actually. While this whole argument was going on, India actually has some of the strongest net neutrality legislation in the world. So there comes, the powers that are quote-unquote competing, I guess you could say, with America, or will be competing with America, are going exactly the opposite way. They are investing heavily as a government, as a country, in the internet as a public utility. Whereas the U.S. is going the opposite direction and giving these corporations which everyone hates, You know, like, have you ever heard of someone having a good experience with Comcast
No,
or
in
AT&T?
fact, to be honest with you, Luke, just last night, and I swear in a stack, just last night as we were uploading our TV file, they decided they were going to shut all the internet down for a what they called a scheduled maintenance. And when I called to go, was anybody ever going to tell me? They go, well, it's on the website. And I'm going,
it's ridiculous.
And I do that how?
I was talking to someone outside the FCC today, a protester, and he said that he lives down in Savannah, and the only internet service provider he has access to is Comcast. And they say they're giving him 50 megabytes per second, but he's done testing, and it's practically always down to 20. And he needs to constantly call them up and say, you know, why is I'm paying for something and you're not delivering? And then they up the speed again. But this is the problem with one of the overarching problems with the repeal is that it's handing power over to these huge corporations which do not care about you. They're monopolized. They know that they're the only ones with the product, so they can sell it and at whatever quality and at whatever price. And we can't touch them. And if you look at other countries, like, you know, as I mentioned, I'm from the UK, and there's, you know, the UK internet isn't perfect by any means, but there's actual competition. You can go to BT, you can go to Virgin, you can go to, for mobile, you can go to, you know, Three or Vodafone or whatever outlet. And they were all, there's some sort of competition there, which, you know, why not, while not perfect, allows for you to say, okay, well, I don't like what you're providing me, so I'm going to take my business elsewhere. You can't do that in the US.
No.
And net neutrality is only going to make that work.
Yeah, but what do you say to the person, Luke, who says, you know, this is going to create that competition here? It's going to give, you know, innovators the ability to, you know, because it was regulated like the phone companies, and you know that's bad. So this is going to encourage entrepreneurial internet companies, startups, to be able to provide those better services.
That's like absolutely ridiculous. This is the thing that Pi wants to make you believe. He wants to make you believe that the internet service providers are the internet. The ISPs are not the internet. Comcast, AT&T, Sprint, Verizon, whatever, they're not the internet. The internet are the companies that are set up online. The small companies, be it, you know, whatever, Facebook back in the day, Amazon way back in the day, those are the innovators. The ISPs are only providing a space for that innovation to take place. And what the ISPs, their only job, basically, is to provide fast, cheap, and efficient internet. And they have a proven record of not doing this in the U.S. Because, as I mentioned earlier, like they have monopolized large areas.
Let me ask you, you know, kind of last line of questioning, because, you know, there are some who are saying, and actually I got a couple of questions, but, you know, the last kind of line is, you know, this could spur, you know, government, you know, local control, municipalities springing up to provide as part of it, you know, a tax-based service. Do you see that happening, or have these companies just grown so large and so powerful that that's not ever going to happen?
Well, I think you've got to be helpful with this sort of thing. There are signs that, you know, people are themselves taking up the pitchforks, so to speak. You know, in Detroit, which is a city not known for its public service, unfortunately, people are banding together and kind of creating communal Wi-Fi networks. Google Fiber is something which, you know, Comcast and Verizon, etc., are terrified of because they know they have a better product. In certain rural areas, like I've got family in Vermont, and they're banding together to go to their state representatives and say that, listen, the internet access we have is awful and or non-existent. So there are some signs of kind of grassroots activism around the internet and around kind of creating sustainable, fast, cheap internet for wherever you are in the U.S. And I think that that's only going to improve as, you know, populations get older and more kind of adapt to being permanently online. No. But at the same time, we do have to face up to these massive corporate Belmonts at the same time.
Yeah. Last question. You know, obviously there are, I think, like 30 states who have already signed on to a lawsuit. Do you see any hope in that direction? Given our Supreme Court is so backwards, do you see any legislative, you know, pushback on this, or is this a done deal?
It's difficult to say, frankly, because, the environment, the political environment, as we've seen plenty of times over the last 2 years, can shift dramatically. I mean, I do take heart from the fact that I think it's 18 attorney generals, states attorney generals, have kind of announced plans to take the FCC to court to sue them, and then there's several private suits that are waiting in the wings. So what I think is going to happen is that this decision is going to be kind of stuck in the mud for a while, which gives us all a breathing space, which gives us all time to write to our elected officials, to call our elected officials, Republican or Democrat, and say, listen, this is messed up. I don't want this. The people don't want this. And you need to vote no on this, and you need to repeal it. Repeal the repeal. And that's also, just to go on a tangent here, actually, one of the most interesting things I've seen about the whole net neutrality debate is that the far right, or the right wing in the country, hates it as well. If you go in the Breitbart comment section about, on articles about net neutrality, you'll see hundreds, thousands of people complaining, saying this is an awful deal, this is just more power to the corporatists. And the same type of comment you see on, reacting to it on Think Progress.
Right.
So it's kind of like that weird union there.
No, I mean, like we said a minute ago, hey, look, when you get 70, 80% of the country in a country that is very divided to say the healthcare thing is bad, the tax thing is bad, this is bad, there's an opportunity to really make some at least decent policy and decent changes, I think.
Yeah. No, I know, absolutely. I mean, it's weird to have people unite around an issue in the U.S. today because of just how sadly polarized our politics has become, and that's partly due to tech, but that's a whole different argument. So, as you said, as I've said, like, when you see people on the right and the left saying this is a bad idea, then
it's a bad idea.
There. Yeah.
It is that simple.
But I mean, going into 2018, if we can keep the FCC's decision, as I mentioned, like stuck in the mud for a while, then that creates hope that potentially, when the midterms roll around, but now the Democrats that have a, albeit difficult, but a path nonetheless to the Senate, there can be some changes in the House. Once that environment has changed, then that would potentially create the chance for lawmakers to put a stop to this. But the important thing for now is to just keep up the fight, keep calling elected officials, letting them know your opinion, and telling them that that the repeal is an awful idea.
There you go. Luke, I appreciate the time. Great talking with you. Love to have you back again real soon.
No problem. Thanks a lot. Appreciate coming on.
Good stuff. Luke Barnes, reporter there at Think Progress. Check out his article. We'll make sure we get our link at thericksmithshow.com. Quick break. Right back after this. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Time to talk.
Then it all crashes down, and you break your crown, and you put your weight up on this. Just one more thing, just to play the game. But the castles crumble, and you're left with just a day where your crown king nothing.
Your proud defender of the working class majority, Rick Smith.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1852. That was the day socialist leader Daniel De Leon was born in Curacao to Dutch Jewish parents. As a young man, he traveled Europe. He settled in New York City and earned a law degree from Columbia University in 1878. De Leon joined the Socialist Labor Party in 1890 and became the editor of its newspaper, The People. His book, Socialist Landmarks, consisting of a series of lectures, became wildly popular. These lectures included Reform or Revolution, What Means This Strike, The Burning Question of Trade Unionism, and Socialist Reconstruction of Society. De Leon warned of reforms under capitalism as illusory. He argued for revolutionary socialism and soon assumed leadership of the Socialist Labor Party. As a former member of the Knights of Labor, he was critical of the American labor movement, often referring to the AFL as the American separation of labor for its business unionism and refusal to organize any but the most highly skilled white craft workers. De Leon also took a strong stand against racism in the socialist movement, stating, quote, "Why should a truly socialist organization of whites not take in Negro members, but organize these in separate bodies? On account of outside prejudice, then the body is not truly socialist." De Leon was among the socialist leaders at the founding 1905 Conference of the Industrial Workers of the World. By 1908, he and others looked to effect social change through the Socialist Party and existing trade union movement. This put them at odds with the direct action perspective of the IWW. Many left the IWW at this point, including De Leon and socialist leader Eugene V. Debs. When he died in 1914, more than 30,000 turned out for his funeral. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show.
In hindsight, the new strategy was flawed, complex, poorly reviewed, poorly executed, and poorly monitored. Just because we're stupid doesn't mean everybody else was. It is very unfortunate. It plays right into all the hands of a bunch of pundits out there, but that's life. We'll have to deal with that. Just because we're stupid doesn't mean everybody else was.
Come crashing down. Oh, I want to be in the number when the banks come crashing down.
Yes, one of my favorite Jamie Dimon quotes. Just because we're stupid doesn't mean everybody else was. You may remember the big collapse that happened a couple years ago. You know, J.P. Morgan Chase. They're part of that. Evidently, the J.P. Morgan CEO, he's again, you know, what I find interesting out there saying that the Trump tax plan is going to be great. And again, just because we're stupid doesn't mean everybody else is. Remember that quote. What he said was a competitive 20% corporate tax rate could support the creation of as many as 2 million new jobs. If the tax savings went to new job creation. And, you know, it's one of these things where you go, okay, 2 key words in that sentence, could and if. It could create 2 million new jobs. It could create 10 million new jobs. It could create a million new jobs. It could just create every job ever known to man. It could, but it's not going to. We already know that. And then if. The other word being if. Could create 2 million new jobs if the tax savings went to new job creation. Again, we know could isn't going to happen, and I guarantee you if isn't going to happen either. Now, the reason I bring this up is now Jamie Dimon's the CEO of J.P. Morgan Chase. Evidently, their financial analysts are saying maybe potentially 200,000 jobs, maybe. Let's not get carried away. Might have a small effect on the economy next year. Maybe an additional 0.25% of growth, maybe. And you look at this, and again, you've even got, these are the people who should want this in the worst way. And they're going, it's not gonna create the demand we need. It's gonna make rich people really happy. And we're in favor of that, but it's really not going to create any of the jobs. And look, and this is the sales ship of all of this stuff. If it's the tax thing or the net neutrality, tell me once. And again, I've been doing this show now. We're in our 13th year, and I've asked this question repeatedly over every one of those years. Find me something that we've privatized, that we used to do for ourselves as we the people, something we did, that we then said, here, private interest, do this better, more efficiently, more cost effective, and make sure that everybody is covered in. And yet that response has never come, because there isn't anything that we've privatized that ended up coming back better than what we were doing for ourselves. And cheaper, and all the the wild expectations that they throw out. It's gonna be it's the greatest thing since bread. Amazing. And now take this with this kind of stuff. How many of these predictions do all politicians, but especially the Republicans who keep selling us this free market ideology that we just let business be more business friendly. We're going to help business. And look, I'm not anti-business, but at the end of the day, saying that we have to give them everything, or they're going to leave, or they're not going to act in their own interest is ridiculous. You look at that clip with Gary Cohen, where he's going to all the CEOs going, how many people are going to hire once you get all this money? And virtually nobody raises their hand because they're honest. They're going, you know what? You give me a huge tax break, I get an extra vacation house. My great-grandchildren, their college is paid for. My great-great-grandchildren, their college is paid for. They'll never have to work a day in their lives. Doesn't mean they're going to go hiring people. And earlier we talked with Ed Mooney, the vice president of CWA 2-13. And he said, look, you get these benevolent employers. None of them have signed on to the letter saying that if the tax bill is passed, the employees are going to make $4,000 more. None. And look, I've had people go, but Rick, Donald Trump said we're all going to get $4,000. No, that's not what he said. There's no Trump prize coming. They didn't guarantee that for you and me. What we're guaranteed is that whatever tax cuts we do get, however minuscule, in the next decade, they're all gone. And then our rates are up. And we pay for all of the tax cuts where they went, upward. This is not rocket science. And again, tell me one of these conservative schemes that has actually panned out the way it was sold. I look at this trickle down stuff, and I was just a teenager at the time. Granted, a somewhat streetwise teenager. They told, this is the theory. They told me I'm a kid delivering newspapers. We're going to give business all this money. We're going to give the rich all this. They're going to have all this money, and then it's going to trickle down to the rest of us, and we'll benefit from the rain. And even then, I was going, that doesn't sound right, because if you give all the money, how does it come down? Well, they're going to create jobs. Well, are they? Is there any guarantee in that? Well, no. But they'll have all this money and they won't know what to do with it, so they'll have to create jobs. I go, that doesn't make any sense. Because as a paper boy, again, this goes back to being a paper boy, I understood the idea of supply and demand. I had 300 Sunday newspapers I had to deliver. And there were times that I would have someone come along and help. And I would pay them a little bit. Just for their help. If I had 200 Sundays, what need is help? Had you given me a bit of money and only the 200 papers, I would have kept the money and still delivered the papers. I wouldn't have hired anybody. It's just common sense. But yet, we've got our politicians who keep selling us the same snake oil in the hopes that maybe we're just too dumb to realize it. I mean, that's the only thing I can come up with. So when I hear Jamie Dimon said 2 million jobs, and I'm sure there's some nitwit out there going, yeah, Jamie Dimon said 2 million jobs. Jamie Dimon's a smart guy. He runs a big company. And he's a smart guy, and he does run a big company, and he really figured out how to screw the federal government and take a lot of money from them. Again, really, really smart guy. Didn't help you or me, though, but a really, really smart guy. Knows what to do with money. Make himself more. I don't necessarily know that this is going to be better for you and me. So there's just so much of this stuff that's just, it's just mind-blowing on so many levels. That then the hope is maybe we wake up. Maybe, just maybe. Not holding my breath, just maybe. Anyway, I'm going to take a quick break. When we come back, I'm going to talk, I want to highlight candidates as much as possible. I look at Tuesday's huge victory in Alabama with great excitement. 2018 could be a bloodbath year where we take back and we push back against all of this horrible policy. And maybe we move in a positive direction of a new deal, a smart policy that's going to get us at least somewhere near back to sanity. So we come back, we talk with Carl Sporer about his run out in Illinois and why. Quick break, right back.
90% of the wealth. Where do you fit in? Take a look at yourself. 10% of the people own 90% of the wealth.
Where smart policy and sound investment matters. The Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1990. That was the day that 20,000 workers in the city of Fez, in the North African country of Morocco, went out on strike. Austerity measures had hit the country's working people hard during the 1980s. A drought had made the situation even worse. Unemployment rates for those under 21 had soared to higher than 30%. Two labor unions, the General Workers' Trade Union and the Democratic Confederation of Labor, called for a general strike. Government officials agreed to meet with the unions to discuss their demands. But the government would not agree to specific wage increases. Plans for the general strike moved forward. It is estimated that more than half of the Fez workforce participated in the general strike. Large numbers of workers in other Moroccan cities also participated in the action. In Fez, bus drivers showed their solidarity by joining the strike. In response, the government attempted to keep bus service going by putting police and soldiers behind the wheel. This angered many of the young demonstrators, and some threw stones at the scab drivers. Armed forces clashed violently with the strikers. The government claimed the strikers started the violence. The protesters pointed toward the police. A fire was started at the 5-star Hotel Menendez in Fez. Other symbols of wealth, such as limousines, car dealerships, and banks, were also damaged. After the 24-day strike, Moroccan officials claimed that 2 demonstrators had been killed. But human rights groups disputed that number and said 33 had been killed. Many more were injured. Hundreds were arrested. After the strike, the government agreed to raise wages by 15%. Many protesters were tried for their participation in the demonstrations. Some received prison sentences as long as 10 years. Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com.
Last year, America's largest internet provider, Comcast, took over the second largest, Time Warner. So Comcast is now a coast-to-coast beast, running its proprietary lines into 25 million of our homes. Bad enough that this market power allows the internet giant to gouge consumers, but it has an even more sinister reason for muscling up. Comcast, along with a handful of other internet service corporations, intend to eviscerate the pure egalitarian ethic of net neutrality. The great virtue of the internet is that no one controls its content. This digital communication technology has been so successful and socially valuable because it is a wide-open democratic forum, accessible on equal terms to all who want to put information, images, opinions, etc. on it, or to download any of the same from it. But if corporate powers could restrict the flow of internet communication, they could collect billions in tolls for privileged access. Thus, the real motivation behind Comcast's 2016 mega merger was that their added market control would set them up to be the very gatekeeper that the internet community doesn't need and adamantly opposes. Want it or not, though, lobbyists for Comcast and the few other giants that own practically all of the wires that link U.S. internet users to the global web now have Donald Trump's support to let them dictate to the millions of content providers what can go through the wires and on what terms. Rather than having one big broadband freeway open for transporting everyone's internet content, these monopolists intend to create express toll lanes they can sell at a premium to the richest content providers, leaving all other providers stuck in the slow lanes. This is Jim Hightower saying, there's still time to fight back. Go to battleforthenet.com to help put a stop to this corporate coup.
Hightower's commentaries are brought to you by the Hightower Lowdown, the monthly newsletter with Hightower's take on what Wall Street and Washington are up to. For information, visit hightowerlowdown.org.
Organizing America 3 hours each night. The Rick Smith Show.
And the radio is in the hands of such a lot of fools trying to anesthetize the way that you feel. Radio is a sound salvation. Radio is cleaning up the nation. So you better listen to the
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Website, ricksmithshow.com. So big day today. I got to tell you, between the tax thing and the death of net neutrality, if you're not angry, if you're not upset, if you're not ready to storm the Bastille, grab the pitchforks, the flaming sticks, I don't know what's going to get you up off the couch. These last couple of days have just been infuriating. And the reality is what has to happen is 2018 is just around the corner. We need people who are going to step forward, stand up, and be the great working class champions that we need, the next generation of working class heroes. And one of those guys is my next guest. I'm really hopeful to see what happens in Illinois' 15th congressional district next November. That's why I've got Carl Sporer here. He is that candidate for the 15th district there in Illinois. Carl, thanks for taking time for us.
Hey, thanks for having me, Rick.
So, I look at what happened today with the death of net neutrality. I look at this tax thing. More than ever, we need people with some sanity and some working class ethic in the halls of power.
Well, absolutely. I mean, everything seems to be a fire sale these days, whether it's federal lands or net neutrality or the future with this tax bill. Everything's for sale, and we've got to take government back.
Yeah, I get the idea that things are for sale, but, what did we get for the net neutrality thing, for ending that? I don't know that we, the people, got anything but screwed.
Well, our congressman got $101 million in campaign contributions.
Okay, there you go. Now we know who got paid. It wasn't you or me.
No, and we're going to pay. I mean, it's just basic common sense. If companies invest $101 million into something, they're expecting a huge return on investment, and that return is going to be tolls and all sorts of restrictions on what we can see. I mean, these are the kinds of things that go on in countries like China, and now I guess it's come to America.
I would even say China has this kind of screwed up scenario. But you may be right, because look, at the end of this, you look at what we're seeing. If it wasn't the health care, if it the tax bill, it's really a fundamental shift in what made this country great, which was a government of, for, and by we the people, not so much the corporation.
Well, it is definitely an oligarchy, or maybe even a plutocracy, which is when a small group of rich people run the country, and that certainly looks like what's going on. International, multinational corporations and a small group of billionaires are in control of everything, and even with all that they have, they want to take more when there's almost nothing left to give, and that's really a primary concern for me. And one of my major motivators is, we are kind of getting to that place where we're going to have a last chance to have a democratic revolution. And if it goes another 5 years, 6 years, 7 years, and the amount of people that have nothing to lose gets to a critical mass, I mean, we could have some serious upheaval in this country, and we've got to head that off.
No, I absolutely agree with you. I've been saying for a very long time. In fact, I was saying last year during the election, with all of this anger and all of this frustration and all of this being pent up, if Trump wins and when he won, I said, what's going to happen with that anger and how do you use it when he doesn't deliver? And in fact, he does what he has been doing, making that anger worse and making those people's lives actually worse. I mean, I'm sure they don't know it yet, but it's going to harm them, his base, I think, the most.
Well, I mean, this tax scam plan that is being put forward, the people that voted for him, his primary base and voting bloc, they're going to be hurt the worst, and they're going to see the least for the least amount of time. I hope that the light goes on in their heads at some point in time, and they realize just how bad they got the short end of the stick on this.
So let me ask you this. I mean, as you're out, and as I get this, you have one of the largest congressional districts in the entire country, geographically speaking, and it's a fairly conservative area, correct?
Absolutely. We're the biggest district east of the Mississippi, and we're approximately 61% Republican. and the rest, a great many are Democrats and a few independents. But absolutely. But I've gone to places that Trump won by 49 points. And honestly, the first time or two I went to a place like that, I had some concerns for my well-being, to be honest with you. I think as any rational human being would.
Right.
But as you start talking to folks, most of them haven't seen their representative. And the fact that a representative or someone who hopes to be a representative has come and taken the time to listen to what they have to say and to offer them a few rational and reasonable possible solutions to some of the things that are going on in these towns the size of 3,000 or 4,000 or 1,500 folks that have just been completely ignored. They appreciate the fact that you care enough to come down and visit with them. And so I don't know what the outcome will be in a district that is this red, but I know there are a lot of districts that are a lot closer, even here in southern Illinois, and they're going to go blue for sure. If Alabama is any indication of what's out there, these districts that are only 4 or 5, 55% or 52% Republican, they're going to go blue for sure, because there's enough independents and intelligent thinking Republicans that will give the proper consideration to what they actually got in the deal, and they'll turn those districts.
I hope so, because the hope is that the damage so far isn't absolutely permanent. I mean, the Supreme Court absolutely big trouble there, but so far nothing really horrible has happened that can't be undone in 2018, which is why I think it's so important that people like you step forward and say, you know what, we're going to go talk to those people and we're going to put ourselves on the line. Because, I think in this country what's happened is we've gotten so used to shouting at each other that we don't actually listen and have these conversations. With the internet and with all kinds of things, you don't actually sit across the table and have a beer with somebody you disagree with.
Well, and it's interesting you say that, because just today I was speaking to one of my supporters, and she was out doing some canvassing door to door, and she said she had heard 2 or 3 people say the same thing. I'd never really talked to a Democrat before, and we've got to stop with this R's and D's, and first put an A at the end of our names. And we're Americans first,
right?
And then we'll lean one way or the other based on upbringing or philosophy. But we are all in the same boat and fighting each other. All that does is make the multinational corporations and the billionaire class happy, because us divided is how they're stealing everything from us. We've got to come together. We have got to unite as a working class, regardless of political affiliation, and come together and say enough is enough. It's time to restore some sanity and some moral and ethics to the leadership of our country and the way we operate when we talk to each other.
No, I'm spot on right there with you. But how do you do that when ideologically you look at the Republican Party and right now there's very little ideologically that they put on the table that I agree with, and I would argue that most working class people don't necessarily agree with. How do you bridge? When you're talking with somebody, how do you bridge that divide?
Well, I kind of look at it a little differently, Rick. I kind of see it as an oil fire. An oil rig catches on fire. You can't put it out with water or chemicals. What do? You take a great big pack of dynamite and you blow it up and you take all the oxygen away, and the fire goes out and you cap it, and everything's under control. I think that's what this presidency and what is going on in the Republican side of the House, I think that's what we're going to get in America. We're taking it to, the most extreme place that we can go, and I think they're going to blow themselves up, and this fire is going to blow out, or at least enough of it is going to blow out that we can get Democrats back in control and we can get this thing settled down. And I think we're starting to see some of that already.
I sure hope you're right. I mean, Tuesday night, the election in Alabama restored a touch of hope because I've been saying, how far down is rock bottom? And I guess, alleged pedophilia is the bottom of where they're going to go. But I sure hope you're right.
Well, and the other thing that I think you and I think you're a little bit younger than I am, but, people of our generation are not realizing is what's going on with the majority of this younger generation. And I think some of that was responsible for what happened in Alabama. I mean, you even had the young Republicans come out and say, we're not going to support Roy Moore. And so as the baby boomers start, voting less or passing away, and this new generation that has come up with a different set of rules starts to take hold, I think that's going to create a good bit of change. And I also, what we saw in Alabama was the African American community. It really is starting to get engaged, because when they see what's going on with Donald Trump, they feel fear, and they know what fear looks like and have lived it their whole lives, and they're starting to use their voting power. So I think between the younger generation and the waking up of people of color, both Latinos and African Americans, I think we're going to do well.
I sure hope so. The website is carl2018.com if you want to check out Carl Sporer's website. Also, you can follow him on Twitter. Carl Sporer 2018 is the Twitter handle. In looking at this election, I mean, money is really a huge driver. And I think you said that your opponent, I forgot how much money he brought in over this being spent in his area. Money's a huge part of this, and getting folks like you a couple of bucks, some volunteers, that's always the struggle, isn't it?
Well, absolutely. And we are a relatively poor rural district, and so it is a struggle. Our campaign is connected with some people that are going to help us make a national campaign out of this. Our congressman is now sitting on the Reconciliation Committee, so he's put a huge target on his back by doing so. He's also made some very unfortunate statements along the way, like saying God is going to cure global warming and men shouldn't pay for prenatal health care. So we're really envisioning that we're going to get some help from outside the district, because this guy has now achieved a level where on a national basis, people are starting to see how bad he is. And that's really the wild card in this. If we're able to do that, we're going to give him a heck of a run.
No, I mean, this is what has to happen all across the country. And this is why I suggest people, the Bernie Sanders for the entire election was talking about $27. We get a bunch of people throwing $27 into an election. We get some actual money to be able to compete. And I hate to say it, but it comes down to dollars and cents to be able to compete in this election, in this environment. I wish it weren't that way, but it is.
Well, we definitely need campaign finance reform, and you hit the nail directly on the head as usual. People ask me, well, what can I do to help? And younger people that are raising families, they don't have time. Is that, if you can donate $2 or $3 or $5, or if you can, give a couple hours on a Saturday and stuff envelopes. The first thing that's got to happen is people have got to say and realize that things are really bad, and democracy is not free, and it takes work and to get engaged. And there are all sorts of things that you can do. It's just a matter of finding what you're good at and what you fits your time and schedule. And if you can't do any of that, like you say, if you can donate a few dollars, it's all helpful. All those things added up together is what turns these districts and what makes an Alabama happen. It took all of those things. And so don't feel helpless. Don't feel like there's nothing you can do, or, with my $5 or $10, is that going to help? Yes, it is going to help. And you know what? You're going to feel good. You're going to feel like you're a part of that. You're going to feel invested. If you can just say, hey, on primary day or on election day, I'm going to make sure one of my friends gets to, or two of my friends, I'm going to commit myself to getting them to the voting booth. I'm going to start working 2 or 3 months beforehand. I'm going to talk to them. I'm going to have it set up. If I have to give them a ride, I mean, there's all sorts of things that can be done to turn these things, and we can all be a part of it. And it's important that we're all a part of it and we're all invested in it.
It's great stuff. And look, I think, I said this a while ago, I think Donald Trump is going to be remembered as one of the greatest presidents for bringing this country together. He's going to be the great uniter. Now, granted, we're going to be united against him, but it's going to be, he's going to unite the country.
Well, absolutely. I coach young women at the university, and they they were very concerned when he was first elected, and their concerns are continue to go on. And they say, God, it's never been worse. I said, well, you know what? I would imagine that people that lived through World War II, I would imagine that was worse than what we have right now. And look what happened when the war ended. We went through this greatest cycle of prosperity. It was one of the best times in our country, and maybe the best time in our country. So, going through when you're in the middle of tough times, it's hard to see the light. But the tougher the times, the greater you're going to feel, and the greater things are going to be on the other side. And like you said, thank you, Donald Trump, for making things so tough and making us realize who we are and that our democracy is valuable. We're going to fight for it, and when we get it back, we're going to appreciate it.
Good stuff. And look, as you brought up World War II, it was the organizing that went on during the Great Depression and the organizing that went on during the war to push for better wages, hours, conditions, for safety nets, all of that stuff. And now, same thing. We got to be organizing. We got to be out there pushing candidates. Folks like you, Carl, I appreciate the time. Always great talking with you. Keep it up, and love to have you back again soon.
Hey, I love talking to you. Have a great time, and thank you, listeners, for having me give me a little bit of your evening.
Good stuff. Thanks so much, Carl. Carl Sporer. You want to check out his website, carl2018.com. We'll get a link at thericksmithshow.com, or you can follow him on Twitter, Carl Sporer 2018. Let's take a quick break. Right back after this. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
From United Nations headquarters in New York, this is your World in 2 Minutes. I'm your host, Luke Vargas, for Talk Media News. Prime Minister Theresa May suffered a major defeat in the British Parliament on Wednesday as members of her Conservative Party joined the opposition Labour Party to demand an up-or-down vote on a final Brexit deal. May tried her best to convince lawmakers that their input would be taken seriously, but those promises weren't enough. While Parliament could conceivably reject an eventual Brexit agreement, May put on a brave face on Thursday and said the UK pullout from the EU was proceeding smoothly toward a 2019 target date.
I'm disappointed with the amendment, but actually the EU withdrawal bill is making good progress through the House of Commons, and we're on course to deliver on Brexit.
One of Colombia's largest criminal gangs has ended an insurgent campaign against the Colombian government. Los Urabeños, also known as the Gulf Clan, operates several of the most lucrative drug trading routes out of Colombia. The group is also notorious for kidnapping and human trafficking. This week's surrender came as the Colombian government closed in on many of the gang's leaders as a part of a broad crackdown on criminal networks. And Zimbabwe's president is calling on the U.S. and other Western countries to lift economic sanctions on his country, saying economic restrictions were holding back growth. President Emerson Mnangagwa succeeded Zimbabwe's longtime ruler Robert Mugabe last month through a process that resembled a military coup. Mnangagwa has since promised political reforms and said new elections scheduled for next summer could take place even earlier, but those promises weren't enough for the U.S. government. Earlier this week, a top State Department official said the U.S. would only re-engage with Zimbabwe after new elections are held and political institutions in the country are fully demilitarized. For more global news headlines, visit TalkMediaNews.com. From United Nations headquarters in New York, this is...
Remembering that united we bargain, divided we beg. Rick Smith.
To this battle, take my Union gun. Gonna end this world of slavery, for this war is one you're bound to lose. You fascists are bound to lose.
So it looks like the Koch brothers are going to be have started a new hedge fund, or a private equity group, if you will. Koch Disruptive Technologies. No idea how much they're putting toward it. But evidently they're planning to take over Time Incorporated. Now remember, look, one of the things that I've been concerned about, especially with the net neutrality, is the consolidation of our media. So now you've got the Koch brothers creating this private equity firm, and their goal is to take over, all of our media. And you go, but Rick, it's only Time magazine. What's that? What could possibly be in that? Understand, Time magazine, the Meredith Corporation, evidently, their people, Fortune, Sports Illustrated, Family Circle, Parents, Midwest Living, Better Homes and Gardens, and a bunch of other publications that they say gives them a readership of somewhere around 135 million people. So you think about something that reaches, at least a third to a half of the nation, they're now going to grab control of. Now, understand, they're not going to turn it radical, rabid, right-wing immediately. But, we're heading in this direction. And you look at, today you had Trump jumping in the middle of the Disney Fox thing. Worried that, they're going to sell off Fox News. And again, it's one of these things that, why is Donald Trump talking to Rupert Murdoch about the Fox Disney agreement? Why is that? Evidently, Disney is going to be buying Fox News for somewhere around $52.4 billion. Now, here's the weird thing about this. Why is Trump getting in the middle of it? I mean, what we're talking about is another consolidation of our media, more consolidation of what we see, hear, and read. And why is this any different than the AT&T Time Warner agreement? That evidently I guess the Justice Department is kind of holding off on. Think about all of the monopolization and think about the perfect storm of where we're going to be in 5 years if everything goes through. You see mega mergers and just these behemoth telecom companies with no rules whatsoever. The Wild West, for them to impose whatever they want on us. And you look at the big carriers for cell phones. I mean, you really have two. There's a couple that dabble, but they're more of a nuisance than they're really worth. In other countries, they have real competition. And they pay their workers reasonably, and they have decent service. Here, we don't get that. Like I said earlier, I mean, my second biggest bill is my cell phone bill. I mean, I didn't pay as much for my first new car. I didn't pay that in a monthly bill what I pay for my cell phone. I mean, it's that outrageous. And what we've allowed to happen. Now, understand, the other part of this is that with this net neutrality thing, there's also talk of loosening other restrictions on letting, say, Sinclair Broadcasting own more stations, own more media outlets. So as you're watching all this consolidation, and it's happening right before our very eyes, it should be those days where we're going, you know what? We need to get active. We need to get engaged. We need to get angry. I'm on the angry train. If you missed any of today's program, thericksmithshow.com. That's where you go to get the podcast, the Rick Smith Show app on the smartphone. Take the program on the go. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Thanks so much for being here.
You've been listening to The Rick Smith Show. Together, we can make America better. Email rick@thericksmithshow.com or interact with us anytime at thericksmithshow.com.